So, what really makes someone successful? For decades, we thought we had it all figured out. Hard work, being resilient, having self control. But what if we've had it completely backwards this whole time? Let's get into it, because the real story of who gets ahead and why, well, it's probably not what you're thinking.
I want you to imagine you're 4 years old again. Some researcher puts a marshmallow right in front of you. They tell you, hey, you can eat this right now. But if you can just wait 15 minutes all by yourself until I get back, you'll get two. So what do? This one little choice from a super famous experiment was believed to map out your entire life. Right, so for about 50 years, that marshmallow test created this whole industry of self-help books and school programs. The big idea was that success wasn't just luck. Nope, it was built on three core pillars, three traits that, supposedly, we could teach anyone and turn them into a super high achiever. Pillar number one comes straight out of that test. It was the brainchild of psychologist Walter Mischel, and it's called delayed gratification. It's this idea that successful people are just masters of long-term thinking. They can make a sacrifice today, like hitting the books instead of playing video games, because they know there's a bigger prize down the road. It's all about that self-control. Okay, so pillar number two is the growth mindset, a huge idea from Carol Dweck at Stanford. This one is really all about resilience. See, people with a growth mindset, they don't see failure as the end of the world. For them, it's just data. It's a chance to learn. They mess up, figure out why, and come back even stronger because they truly believe they can get better. And that brings us to the third pillar, deliberate practice, from Kay Anders Erickson. Now, this isn't just about working hard for the sake of it. No, this is about working smart. It's about constantly looking at your own performance, finding the weak spots, and then making a super targeted plan to get better. It's this endless loop of self-assessment and improvement. So, the path seems pretty clear, doesn't it? All we have to do is teach our kids these three things: self-control, resilience, and self-assessment, and boom, everyone can be successful. It's a really nice thought. There's just one tiny problem. When we actually try to do it, it doesn't really work. And that's because we've been looking at the whole thing from the wrong direction. And this is where we get to the big twist. It's a fundamental rule in science that just completely flips our understanding of success on its head. It's the idea that the map is not the territory. Correlation does not equal causation. You've probably heard this phrase before, but it is everything. Just because two things seem to happen together, it absolutely does not mean that one of them caused the other. This one idea is the key to unlocking this whole puzzle. Let me give you a really simple example. We hear all the time that tons of successful people get up at like 4 a.m. But think about it. Does waking up at 4 in the morning cause you to be successful? Of course not. It's the other way around. And that is the core of this whole thing. Being successful is what gives you a growth mindset. It's success that motivates you to practice deliberately and makes it easier to have self-control. Success isn't the result of having these traits. In many ways, it's the cause. So, if these traits don't cause success, what does? But when you look at the data, it's actually not even close. The single biggest predictor of how successful you'll be in life isn't your mindset or how hard you work. It's whether your parents are rich or poor. And it all comes down to some really profound differences in how they raise their kids. Yeah, the differences are pretty stark. Wealthier parents tend to talk to their kids using a much wider vocabulary with longer, more complex sentences. The whole vibe is more collaborative, more explanatory. And maybe most important of all, they provide a stable world where promises, like a vacation or a new toy, are usually kept. On the other hand, in homes with fewer resources, life is just more chaotic. Communication can become more direct. Simple commands like yes or no. The attitude can feel more authoritarian, and because life is so volatile, promises often get broken, not out of malice, but just out of necessity. Now, with all that in mind, let's go back and rethink that famous marshmallow test, because it turns out it was never really about willpower at all. Try to see it from the point of view of a kid from an unstable home. Their entire life experience has taught them one very clear lesson. Grown-ups often make promises they can't keep. So, when some random researcher says, hey, I'll be back with 2 marshmallows, the most logical, rational, and frankly, intelligent thing to do is to eat the one you have right in front of you. It's not a failure of self-control. It's a perfectly smart decision based on years of evidence. So, at the end of the day, that marshmallow test isn't measuring a kid's willpower. It's measuring how much they trust the system, how much they trust the adults in charge. A trust that's been built, or broken by the world they grew up in. Okay, so why do these different parenting styles even exist? Does this mean rich parents are just better? Absolutely not. What's really going on is that they are teaching their kids the rules to a completely different game, the game they'll have to play to survive in their own specific world. This right here boils it all down. For kids in wealthier families, the name of the game is negotiate. They're taught to question things, to speak up, to advocate for themselves to get a better deal. But for kids in poorer families, the primary lesson is often obey. The safest and most effective strategy is to follow the rules and do what you're told to avoid getting into trouble. And look, these aren't moral judgments. They are just two different survival playbooks for two very different realities. A parent's number one job isn't to raise a future CEO. It's to teach their kid how to survive in their social environment. If you're poor, talking back to your boss or arguing with a police officer can have catastrophic results, so you learn to obey. But if you're rich, your whole path to success is paved by debating in the boardroom, arguing your case, and negotiating a better deal. Each parenting style is perfectly tuned to the world that child was born into. Okay, this all paints a picture of a pretty rigid system, right? One that seems designed to keep everyone in their place. So if that's true, how does anything ever change? Why do we see huge social upheavals, even revolutions throughout history? Well, if you look at history, the pattern is actually pretty consistent. First, you get what's called elite overproduction. Basically, there are too many rich, ambitious people all fighting for the same few top jobs. This creates a split, and a faction of the elites, the ones who feel like they're losing out, breaks away. Now, to gain power for themselves, they make an alliance with the poor. They go to the masses and make a huge promise. Support us, and we'll cancel your debts, we'll give you land, we'll end your servitude. And that alliance is what leads to a revolution, a complete reset of the entire game. And that leads us to this really fascinating, kind of counterintuitive conclusion. The biggest threat to a stable society isn't the poor population, who are mostly taught to just obey and survive. No, the real danger comes from the rich, who are taught from their very first day to compete, to negotiate, and to always push for more. Which leaves us with one last, pretty big question to think about. We can see that the rules of the game are often designed to keep a rigid structure in place. But we also see this predictable pattern, where that very structure collapses under its own weight. So if society really is a game, maybe the most fundamental rule of all is that sooner or later, someone is always going to flip the entire board over.